Claire Finkelstein is Professor of Law and Professor of Philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, joins us now from Philadelphia. Ms. Finkelstein, good to have you with us here on Al Jazeera. American law is incredibly complicated, so I hope we can simplify it for our international audience. But let's just begin with what we can expect to see in court today when it comes to the defendant's plea and how their trial is going to be heard in the time ahead.
Well, let's be clear what today was supposed to be. Today was supposed to be arraignment day, and that means that it was planned that all 19 defendants were to come into court and plead guilty or not guilty, and of course they had intended to plead not guilty, and that a trial date would then be set. But over the course of the past few weeks, each one of the defendants has waived their arraignments and entered their pleas of not guilty. And so the arraignments became unnecessary. Instead, what the judge did is schedule at 1 o'clock today a hearing to consider the speedy trial requests of two of the defendants, Kenneth Cheeseborough and Sidney Powell, two of the lawyers who were involved in the fake elector scheme. And they have requested to sever their cases not only from the other defendants, but from each other as well. There are also other motions that are going to be considered at some point, such as the question, this will be heard by a federal judge, of whether or not Mark Meadows' case will be removed to federal court.
And of course,
so there will be a number of different...
Can I just jump in there, Ms. Finkelstein? This is why I say it's also very complicated, isn't it, for our audience to understand about who's being charged, why they're being charged, and what sort of court they're going to have their case heard in. The details of the charges, it seems, is what everybody wants to hear about. And you talk about the arraignment,
right.
you know, but what should we be listening out for when the judge starts to talk and when the lawyers start to, you might say, plead the case for their clients?
Right. Well, when we get into the substance, and we will be hearing, unlike in federal court, there will be a YouTube channel. This judge actually has his own YouTube channel, and we're going to hear the case. And the main charge is this racketeering charge known as RICO, racketeering and corrupt influence charge. And that is something that was used against mobsters. In fact, Rudy Giuliani was famous for using that against mobsters in New York under federal law when he was a prosecutor. And it basically means that this was a conspiracy of all 19 defendants together to set aside the election and to engage in false activities to tell lies to the public in order to set aside a valid election. Mm-hmm. And they're using this mobster law to try to make the point about the way that this was a coordinated activity based on other felonies that were committed. And so there's a long list of felonies, Okay. And so you'll hear those what are called predicate felonies trotted out, as well as the racketeering charges.
OK, one thing we have heard a lot about, if you could briefly explain this to us quite succinctly, is what's the difference between a federal trial and any other sort of trial? Because it seems that some of the accused want to get rid of the sort of federal trial aspect of this and go to trial in general. What does this all mean?
So these charges are brought under state law by Fani Willis, who is the state district attorney. So it is not federal at all. This is a state trial. Unlike those brought by Jack Smith, those are brought under federal law. So Donald Trump is facing two sets of state charges, New York and Georgia, and two sets of federal charges. Now, some of the defendants, as I was saying, like Mark Meadows, say, well, I shouldn't be facing state charges at all because I was a federal employee. This should get removed to federal court. And that will get debated and discussed by the federal judge that's going to hear that. And of course, Georgia will want to hang on to the case and to consider all of the charges against all of the defendants in a Georgia court.
Well, we shall soon find out what happens as the hours and the minutes certainly tick away. For the moment, Claire Finkelstein, thank you so much for clarifying all of that for us. Thank you.
Of course.